The CCJ rules the no-confidence motion passed against the Guyana government is valid. And in sport, another high target set as the ICC World Cup continues. I'm Ricardo Robertson. This is Caribbean in 10 for Tuesday, June 18th, 2019. I'll be back with the details after the break. The no-confidence motion against the Guyana government last December was valid. That was the ruling handed down this morning by Guyana's final appeals court, the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ. The court will meet at a later date to determine what happens now. The motion was passed by a simple majority of 33 to 32 in the National Assembly and upheld as valid in the High Court, but the Court of Appeal subsequently ruled that 34 votes were needed, half plus one, for the motion to pass, but the opposition challenged that at the CCJ. This morning, CCJ President Justice Adrian Saunders delivered the ruling which addressed the main point of the appeal, the number of votes needed for the motion to pass.
The court decided that the requirement for a majority of all the elected members of the National Assembly referred to a majority of the total number of votes or seats in the Assembly, irrespective of the number of members who actually vote. In determining that majority, the court was of the opinion that the half plus one rule was not applicable. The court held that since the Assembly comprised an odd number of persons, that is 65, when all the members of the Assembly are present and vote, all that is necessary is to determine whether the motion has garnered, quote, a majority of all the elected members, unquote. Such a majority in the court's view was clearly at least 33 votes.
The parties will meet next Monday to discuss the consequential orders now that the motion has been declared valid. Under the Constitution, elections should be held within 3 months after a no-confidence motion is passed, unless the National Assembly extends the deadline. The Guyana Elections Commission, GECOM, has said the elections are not possible before late November because it has to carry out house-to-house registration to compile a new voters list. But the opposition has argued that the list can be updated without that registration. But Justice Jacob Witt said the CCJ was hoping for a happy marriage between principle and practicality. Meanwhile, the CCJ also ruled that President David Granger's unilateral appointment of Justice James Patterson as GECOM chairman on October 19, 2017 was flawed and not in keeping with the Constitution. The court will now have to make orders to remedy that situation as well. The High Court and the Court of Appeal had previously ruled that Patterson's appointment was valid, but opposition leader Barrett Jagdeo had appealed to the CCJ. He had submitted a list of 18 names for the post, which President Granger had rejected. Justice Saunders described President Granger's appointment of Patterson as unfortunate and said the president could not set out his own requirements when the Constitution already provided for what should happen. And he says lawyers for the parties will be invited to make representation for consequential orders.
In view of the unfortunate process that was followed, in view of the position on the leader of the opposition of criteria that were not sanctioned by the Constitution, and in view of the absence of cogent reasons for deeming unacceptable the candidates and lists provided, the court concluded that the process that was followed in the appointment of Justice Patterson was flawed and in breach of Article 161(2). In this regard, the court overruled Gaskin to the extent that the judgment in that case was in contradiction with anything that was stated by the court in this case.
Over to Trinidad and Tobago now, where a controversial amendment in the Twin Island Republic's Freedom of Information Act has been scrapped. Finance Minister Colum Imbert says Clause 7 has been deleted from the legislation, a move that Opposition Leader Kamala Persad-Bissessar described as a humiliating defeat for the government. The clause initially proposed an increase in the time state entities to have to provide information under the legislation from 30 to 90 days, but then that was amended to 45 days. The legislation also introduced the Attorney General as a gatekeeper in the process to review matters where requests for information were refused. Last night in the Senate, Minister Imbert said that after listening to arguments put forward by legislators, it was decided that the controversial clause be dropped.
And Senator Choate in particular, I was moved by her contribution, and therefore the government will be deleting Clause 7 from the bill. And the reason why we're deleting it is that we are coming back with a standalone review of the Freedom of Information Act.
And stay with us, your Midday Sport is next.
Welcome to this year's 50th Caribbean Broadcast Union Assembly on the island of San Andres. San Andres is a small archipelago located in between Jamaica and Panama in the Western Caribbean Sea. A lush, exotic island rich in culture, history, gastronomy, and breathtaking scenic views. Known for its beaches and 7-colored crystalline waters, the island of San Andres will be proudly hosting this year's event. CBU members will enjoy top-of-the-line accommodations for an unforgettable experience in San Andres, connecting Caribbean nations through this year's 50th edition of the CBU Assembly.
Afghanistan needs an improbable 398 to beat England in their World Cup clash at Old Trafford today. England's massive total of 397 for 6 was propelled by a sensational run by Captain Owen Morgan, whose knock of 148 included a record-breaking 17 sixes. Opening batsman Johnny Bairstow added 90 from 99 balls, while Joe Root scored a classy 88 of 92 deliveries. Here are the highlights.
That's some way to bring up your 50. Oh, this is phenomenal hitting. It's coming out so clean off the bat. Oh, he's dragged it down. Absolutely put away by Morgan. Wowee. Owen Morgan, the 100 up for the England captain in the World Cup. The 4th fastest ever in World Cup history.
Hold on to his coattails and Root. He's going to take charge as well now, with all this batting to come.
Not that.
It's another. Make that the 12th six. And again, huge cheers. Morgan stands there. That's his 16th six, which equals the record in ODI cricket. Maybe he knew what was coming as Root is taken at long on. A bit of relief at last.
And that's Caribbean in 10. Join us again at 6:30 for Caribbean Newsline. Until then, good afternoon.